welcome, bienvenido. You're watching News and Views on this 14th, it's Wednesday the 14th of April. And during the programme today, we do have Ken Campbell with us, our local astronomer. And in the second part of the programme, we've got Dave Heaviside. He's an actor, musician and singer. And he's got a blues night with Marcelo Sainz, guitarist, and also Mama Paula, who's a brilliant guitarist as well. And that's at the Temisa Golf Hotel on Friday. First of all, though, let's give a big welcome to Ken Campbell, our local astronomer. Good afternoon, Ken.
Hi, Karen. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
Getting fed up with this weather.
Oh, I know.
I'm cold. I'm still cold.
It's going to rain today as well this afternoon.
It's not, is it?
Apparently.
I've left all my washing out.
He'll get a double dose. And remembering today, it's around the 11th, 12th, isn't it, that it's the anniversary of Apollo 13.
Well, what we're going to do, we're not going to tell you anything about what's happening in the sky at the moment. Normally I tell you things that you can see, but the clouds are so bad, we're giving that.
All right, then.
We're going to take you back in time 40 years. What were you doing 40 years ago this week? Probably crawling around in your nappy, I would
Something like that, yes.
Yeah, somewhere around about there. Actually, 40 years ago this week, as we're talking about the anniversary of Apollo 13. Now, Apollo 13, we know that Apollo 11 landed on the moon in July 1969. Apollo 12 landed on the moon in November 1969. And then in April 1970, actually April the 11th, we had the launch of Apollo 13. So this was going to be the third mission up to the moon. We had the crew of Apollo 13 was Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes. And the reason I got mixed up, one of the crew actually dropped out just before they were due to launch.
That's right, yeah.
He actually contracted measles. That was Ken Mattingly. He had to be withdrawn a day or two before the launch, and so he was replaced by Fred Hayes. So if 13 was an unlucky number, then NASA were really pushing this myth to the limit. Apollo 13 launched on the 11th of April at 13 hours, 13 minutes. So we're pushing our luck a little bit.
Definitely pushing the luck on the 13th.
So we had a launch. There was a problem with the launch, actually. A lot of people don't realise that there was actually a problem on the launch. The main stage of the rocket has 5 engines that fired it up into space, and the middle engine just didn't light. It didn't light up, so it actually it crawled into space on 4 engines instead of the 5. So we got the launch of the rocket. That was a perfect launch, apart from this one little hiccup that we had. Once the rocket gets into space, it then separates. The first stage drops away after about 2.5 minutes, and then the third stage boosts it up a little bit further, and it gets it into orbit. And then what happens, we've got the command module. This is the command module, it's the cone-shaped bit at the front, and behind it is the service module that carries the fuel and the oxygen and the water, and that main engine at the back is the engine that takes them to and from the moon. So once they're in orbit around the Earth, they fire that main engine behind, and that jets them off towards the moon. Once they're on the way back, they then fire that engine a second time, and it brings them back to Earth. So while he's up there in space, what they have to do next is they have to do a manoeuvre where the command and service modules separate from the main body of the rocket behind. It turns around and it actually picks up the lunar module that's sitting waiting behind it. So we've now got these 3 components joined together. We've got the service module, we've got the command module, and we've got the lunar module all in tandem. So they're set off to the moon in this position. Halfway towards the moon, they were told to stir the fuel tanks. There was a problem with one of the fuel tanks. It just needed a little bit of stir up, a normal thing to happen. But as they went to stir it, there was a short in one of the cables that caused an explosion. The explosion blew out half of the service module. So now we have panic. We've got no fuel, we've got no oxygen, we've got no water. We're in trouble.
Yes, in a lot of trouble. I was just thinking train crash sort of thing.
Well, yeah. the famous phrase was, Houston, we've had a problem. And that was the understatement of the decade. They really did have a problem. Everything was all going offline. They had no fuel, no water, no hydrogen. They were stranded in space. But the problem was they were halfway between the Earth and the moon. So NASA have a problem. Do we turn them round straight away now and bring them straight back to Earth? That's going to require fuel that it didn't have. Because don't forget, they're traveling at 25,000 miles an hour. To stop them and turn them round and bring them back again is going to require fuel that they don't have. So what NASA decided to do was carry them on their journey, let them go ahead with the journey, then they'll swing around the back of the moon. The moon's gravity will work like a slingshot, and as they sling around the back of the moon, it'll then throw them back towards the Earth. So they'll actually get a free return trip coming back to Earth. It means you don't have to use as much fuel. Problem is, they've not got enough oxygen.
Oh, yeah.
So they've got a little bit of a problem. So the way they managed to sort it out was they had to abandon the command module. All 3 astronauts had to move into the lunar module that was sitting on the front, that was getting ready to land on the moon. And they'd used the lunar module as a lifeboat. They had to switch off all the power, all the batteries, everything that was connected with the command and the service module, because they needed the command module to land back on Earth. That's the only part of the rocket that could actually get them back to Earth. So they needed to keep a little bit of life in that to get them back. So there they all are, standing in the lunar module. It's got no seat, so the 3 of them are standing in a place that's meant for 2. And another problem they've got now is, as they're actually breathing out, they're breathing out carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is poisonous. Too much of it and you will die. So they had scrubbers on board the lunar module, but these scrubbers are designed to take the oxygen for 2 astronauts for a certain amount of time. Now we've got 3 astronauts for at least 3 days, and these scrubbers just won't work. Now, they do have scrubbers.
Just one disaster to another.
Well, it gets worse. They have scrubbers in the command module. The only problem is the scrubbers in the command module are square, and the scrubbers in the lunar module are round, would you believe? So they literally had to get plastic bags, piece of tape, and the cover off the instruction manual, and they had to build an adapter that basically fitted a square peg into a round hole to get the oxygen. They had plenty of oxygen, but too much carbon dioxide.
Right.
So here we are now.
The balance was dangerous.
That's it. It was getting out of order. So they've now got them swung around the back of the moon. But the only engine that they've got left is the engine on the lunar module that's meant to land them on the moon. Now, they've never tried this procedure, ever. This is not what it's meant to do. It's only just meant to land them on the moon. What they're going to do is, as they swing around the back of the moon, they're going to have to line up their 3 rockets that they've got connected, line them up in exactly the right direction, and then fire the engine on the lunar module to shoot them back like a bullet, literally. It's faster than a bullet to shoot them back. Now, as I said, this has never been tried before. They set it off, they fired the rocket, and they had to start flying back towards the Earth in 3 days, but only 2.5 days power. So they were really keeping their fingers crossed. They really had to move this.
It's like a thriller, isn't it?
Oh, it was a great thriller.
Yeah.
Well, it was actually yesterday, it was the 13th of April, that the explosion happened. So 40 years ago today, we were all sitting with our television and radio, and we were waiting to find out what was going to happen.
Wow.
So it was a big, exciting time for people like me. In fact, this morning I found upstairs, I've got an old scrapbook, and I should have brought it in really, but I've got the newspaper cuttings of
everything
as it was unfolding before my very eyes. 11 years old I was, sitting there panicking about these astronauts getting back to the Earth.
Wow. And of course, with something like that, it stays in everybody's memories, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. This is something. If you live through it, you'll remember it.
Well, they made a film, didn't they, with Tom Hanks?
Yeah, you got your Tom Hanks film of Apollo 13. That's about as accurate as it gets. They stayed as close to the true story as possible. And actually, part of the film, when they were filming it, there are scenes where the astronauts are weightless. And what they did, they built the film set inside that aeroplane. There's an aeroplane that goes up and goes over the top. As it flies up, and then the engines are switched off and it comes back down. And you can practice floating inside. You've seen the astronauts floating inside. Well, they actually built the film set inside that aeroplane.
Oh, wow.
And so they had the cameras all ready to go. And the aeroplane went over the top, and he said, right, action. and they'd have to act their part as they were actually weightless.
And they have to get it right as well, because that would have been very costly.
But expected to go back and keep doing it.
Yeah, no retakes.
But up until then, whenever you'd seen an astronaut weightless, either he had wires on him or they'd tip the camera over on his side and he'd just basically walk around the room. But during the Apollo 13 movie, Tom Hanks movie, they really were weightless while they were doing certain scenes of it.
Good experience for them.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
So here we are now. We're travelling back now towards the Earth. We're getting closer towards the Earth. At some point, they had to jettison the lunar module that had been the lifeboat, and they had to jettison the service module, it's the tubular part behind, to leave just the cone where the astronauts are inside. But because they'd switched all the power off, they'd switched everything off, and now they've got to reboot all the command module, where this is the bit that's going to bring them back through the Earth's atmosphere and land them on the Earth. But they didn't have enough power.
Right.
The batteries had almost run dry, so they had to run through a procedure. So for 3 days, from literally yesterday up until Saturday, NASA had been working on a way of restarting the command module to use as little power as possible. You need a light to work. You need a fan just to move some of the oxygen around. You need the computer was whittled down to the bare minimum, really. So they jettisoned the lunar module. The lunar module crashed through the Earth's atmosphere and burnt up, which is what it would have done. And then they jettisoned the service module. And I think on the last photograph, we've got a photograph of what the service module was. They were taking photographs out the window, and you could see the damage all along the side of the service module where it had blown the side of the rocket out.
Yeah, if we could see that last photo again, that would be good. And we'll be coming up in a minute.
But this caused another problem. Oh, there it is. That's the actual service module. That was the photograph that they took out the side of the window, and you can see the damage that's run along the side of the service module there. It runs the full length from back to the bottom. Now the thing is, this was the first time that they could actually see this, because don't forget, they're sitting in the cone part that's attached to the front of this, so they can't really see behind them. So once they jettisoned this part, they got ready to re-enter through the Earth's atmosphere. They noticed that the explosion had run the full length of the service module, which meant there was a possibility it could have damaged the heat shield. Now, there's no way of knowing. There's absolutely no way. There's no way. They just literally got to suck it and see.
Yeah.
They turn it round, they turn the rocket round, they turn the heat shield towards the Earth's atmosphere. Now, when rockets are returning to Earth, they have no engines, they have no brakes. All what they're doing is they're rubbing against the Earth's atmosphere. Now, if they come in too shallow, if they come in very steep into the Earth's atmosphere, they'll hit too thick of the atmosphere and they'll burn up completely. If they come in too shallow, then they'll just skim off the top of the Earth's atmosphere like a stone skimming off water, and they'll just bounce off into space. There's no engine to come back around a second time. So you've got to come in through a narrow, really narrow corridor. Too steep, you'll burn up. Too shallow, and you'll bounce off.
You've got to get it just right.
You've got to get it just right. Now, don't forget all this maths and all this planning and all this arrangement. It all had to be recalculated and redone, because by now they should have been walking on the moon. So what they've had to do since yesterday, April the 13th, they had 4 days to recalculate absolute everything. And they didn't have a pocket calculator amongst them. Not a pocket calculator. So everything was worked out on slide rules and bits of paper and logbooks, and they just didn't have it. Didn't even have a calculator. Computers were unheard of.
Yes, that's true.
So they bring in Apollo 13.